So welcome, Kris, to this fireside chat between Tech Mahindra and Dataiku. And today will be, the idea is to, come together and discuss all the developments that are happening in the age of, in the field of AI, ML, Gen AI, and more importantly, how is data becoming more and more important to enable the scaling of AI and Gen AI? And what are you doing about it? What are we doing about it? And what are the trends we are seeing in the marketplace and so on? So maybe we can start with quick introductions, Kris. So would you like to go?
Appreciate the opportunity to have a chat with you today. So my name is Kris Wood. I'm the General Manager and Senior Vice President of Dataiku for the EMEA business. So the EMEA business roughly today is about 50% of our global revenue. So it's a very significant part because the heritage of our company is a French technology company. Although we are now truly global and obviously our official headquarters is based in New York. But there's a strong heritage here in Europe.
Thanks, Kris. And I myself, I'm Saurabh Jha. I'm the Senior Vice President and Global Head for Data and Analytics at Tech Mahindra. So, Kris, why don't we start with some observations? Maybe you can share, and then I'll share in terms of what are the trends we are seeing in the marketplace, as far as data analytics, AI, Gen AI. So, in general, data sourcing and data consumption is concerned. What are you seeing in the marketplace?
So I think firstly, Dataiku, we've been in business for over 10 years. So for us, we've been in AI and been delivering ML ops and other types of capabilities for a long time. But the last couple of years, there's been a shift with the introduction of generative AI and seeing conversation AI and other things that are sort of hitting the mainstream in terms of awareness. So really what that's done is it's kind of brought AI to the forefront of every single company we're talking to. And of course, the reality now is AI is everywhere. It's in every company. It's in every department. And frankly, every company is now becoming an AI company. We've sort of seen this before. So it's something that's going to touch everybody's lives in terms of this market transition. So I think, as everybody, there's a lot of noise, a lot of hype. But I think what's happened over the last couple of years since Gen AI has come out is we're starting to sort of see a little bit more of the coming back to, okay, pragmatically, what is the real use case that they're going to drive value? There's been a lot of experimentation. There's been a lot of almost sort of shadow type Gen AI projects running in organizations. And we're seeing now organizations, or certainly the CIO, starting to think about, okay, we need to think a little bit more about how do we build a strategy for this? How do we prepare ourselves, do things in the right way, and make sure we've got the right data sources, the right AI models, and we're ready to serve our business. So I think it's been an exciting period, but we're back into now probably pragmatically what makes sense to the business and where we're going to drive the real value.
Great. So let me share my perspective. So from a Tech Mahindra perspective, I mean, we work with 400, 500 customers globally, and what we have been seeing is, I'm from a data analytics and AI perspective. So there are 2 or 3 major things, Kris, that I see. One is, like you have already covered, that AI and Gen AI are boardroom discussions now. They're at the forefront. It's no more a team of data scientists sitting in some corner of the organization and creating their machine learning models. It's right in their face, whether it's with Copilot kind of offerings or general usage in day-to-day work, right? So, and there is this saying that goes that all the conversations today are starting with AI and ending with data. So that is something that is ringing very true as far as we are concerned. The other thing that I'm seeing is, there was always this complaint when it came to AI ML that projects remain at a POC stage. I'm not saying that with every customer that was the case. There are n number of organizations who have really scaled. In fact, a lot of their business, deeply involves AI ML running in production continuously 24/7 for smart recommendations and predictions and so on. But a lot of enterprises, large enterprises, there were small projects in pockets and that remained at a POC stage, never saw the day in production. And a similar trend started with Gen AI last year. There's a lot of experimentation. There was a whole lot of interest globally. So I think one thing that our customers have been asking us time and again is, how do we really make this enterprise scale?
Yeah.
And that is where most of the CIOs or CDOs are really focusing on, as to how do we, one is we have to ensure that if we are spending money, it has to be for value. And second is, how do we really scale it up in the organization? And from a risk perspective or from an adoption perspective, there are again two different sets of organizations. We have seen some who have just opened up the field to their entire organization that go ahead and experiment, right? And let's see what comes out of it. Whereas the others who are way more guarded, and for every single thing, and I mean, for them, whether it's data leakage or the privacy and all those things are very, very important because there are regulatory frameworks around it. So they are much more guarded, and I would say, in a very controlled fashion, they're rolling out AI and Gen AI. So that's the observation from my side.
Yeah.
So Kris, I mean, going on to the next part, so that's what we are seeing in the market. So how are you now responding to it? Whether it is in terms of scaling AI, Gen AI, whether it is in terms of ensuring responsible, ethical, bias-free AI, because data is the underlying factor which will determine all of these things. So how is your platform taking care of this entire chain? If you could just weigh in on it.
So I think you raise an interesting point about the sort of POCs and and whether it's in Gen AI or traditional AI, a lot of projects POCs have never gone in production, and I think by nature, data scientists community are experimenters. They like to try things and model, and so but we have 700 customers who are driving real value and real return on investment on some very significant value-based use cases, whether it's churn prediction or fraud detection, dynamic pricing, whatever. Maybe there's so many different examples we have. But I think to really you kind of get it out at scale, you need to democratize more the access to it. And I think that's where the opportunity sits. But also I think the risk is then you've got to make sure that governance and control is there as well. So definitely seeing a big theme around governance, but also a theme about how do we really unlock the potential and make AI an everyday type capability within an organization. So to do that, you need a couple of things. You have to have the data, because it all starts from the data. And we believe that, again, data lives in so many systems and there's so many sources. You have to better access the data where it is to really leverage it, because sometimes you can move it into a modern lake and it exists at other times. There's other applications that can't, but it could still be highly valuable. So being able to get access to data is super important. And the data really is, the analogy I use is the oxygen. It's the oxygen you have. And then the AI and the ML and the business intelligence and analytics, it's kind of like the nervous system. And these two things connect, and then that feeds the brain or the decision making, all the clever things you can do. But it all starts with the data. If you don't have access to the data, then you're not going to drive any real business value. So
absolutely. And let me so adding on to that. So a couple of things. So one is a process related thing that we have observed, and one is a mindset related issue. So mindset issue is that all of these teams are different. So the data team is different, and even within data team, the ingestion team and the data management team and data serving layer, there are different teams, and BI is a different team, and now you have AI ML as a separate team, and so is with Gen AI. And that mindset really needs to break down. That's very, very important, that this is all one single ecosystem. And that requires a whole lot of data literacy. It needs communication from the top, leading by example, so to say. Setting up a governance layer will not help. I think this is more about communication and ensuring that the teams work together. That's part one. Other thing that you mentioned was about that data sitting at different places, and AI and Gen AI especially, they don't necessarily touch data only from the lakehouse or the data warehouse, right? And that's a very interesting point, because then there has to be some kind of a, call it fabric or a semantic layer, or different things that we, different names that we call it with, but there has to be a layer which combines data from different sources, or in case of hybrid scenarios, whether it is multi-cloud or on-premise and cloud. So that semantic layer becomes very, very important. This is purely from a data engineering perspective. The challenge is that now you have multiple sources, different locations like cloud or on-premise, but the data has to be managed and governed with the same framework. Because that data is now going to go into AI systems and Gen AI systems, where end consumers are going to interact with them directly, right? So you cannot, for example, we can't say that the data in the data lake or lake house is very well managed and governed, but we don't know about the data that's coming in from some other source. We have to look at all of them with the same lens, because you don't know where the leakage can happen, where the bias is creeping in. And these things suddenly become way more important and way more complex, right? So now, if I just think from a data team perspective, and if they say, I'm only concerned about the data that lands in my lake house, that approach will not work. They have to look at data of the organization. And on the consuming layer side, there are, what I say, there are three customers. One is BI, BI report, the traditional. Then you have AI ML, where you have these models. And third is Gen AI. Yeah, so the data governance layer that has to be established needs to take care of data wherever it's coming from, whether it's from the analytical platforms, whether it's from transactional platforms, or even silos sitting somewhere else in shadow IT, business, whatever. Because tomorrow, when we talk about ethical AI, bias, or responsible AI, you will never be able to trace where the problem really happened. What was the origin of the issue, unless data is governed throughout its entire lineage. So that becomes very critical.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think the way Dataiku see addressing that problem is we have a universal AI platform that there is to help provide governance across the people and users and what they're accessing and what they're allowed to do, no matter what skill set they are within the organization. So whether it's your analytics, your BI teams, your data scientists, ML teams, and so on. But also to further democratize that into the organization. But we also have governance across the technology side, governance across the LLMs side, governance across all the different data sources. So, and when we talk about governance, we're talking about both internal governance, where you can create your own compliance of what you think is within the boundaries and the kind of rules you want to set, but also applying external governance.
Of course.
With things like the support for the EU AI Act, where it can very easily look at all the AI models and start to help categorize those into the different risk profile and document that so that you're ready to be able to, provide to regulators exactly what you are doing and which models are within the right categories and so on. So, I think governance is one of the top issues right now that we are seeing. And I think that's probably where, we've seen a little bit of, there was a lot of sort of, I guess, acceleration with Gen AI, and now just a little bit, okay, we need to think about these things. There's also governance over cost and control. This is super important because actually it can be very, very expensive running some of these Gen AI services. So having the ability to be able to control that and choose different LLMs options or different compute platforms to ensure that you've got cost control based on the value you're creating from that use case is also very, very important. So we see a combination of people, data, LLM, technology, and cost.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point that you just mentioned about, which LLM to use for what use case, because not everything requires the highest cost, most accurate LLM. And yeah, LLM ops hence becomes absolutely important even from a FinOps perspective, right? So absolutely right. So tell me Dataiku, where do you see it going from here? How are you preparing yourself for further changes? Where do you see this entire area going? If you can just talk a little bit about that.
So, I think we're an exciting stage, an inflection point for our company. We've been in AI probably when it wasn't fashionable, and now we're in AI when it is fashionable. So it's an exciting time to be here. And I think actually if we take something like maybe the Gartner recent quadrant that was out in the Magic Quadrant, in the top right-hand side of that quadrant is 5 vendors who are there clustered together in the leaders quadrant. We're fortunate with the one with the furthest on the right in terms of completeness of vision. But that for me isn't really the greatest point. The point for me that I love about that slide is the validation of what we're doing is we're the only pure play in that slide, and we're actually the only vendor that actually is an enabler and a value add provider to all the other platforms, Microsoft or Amazon, Google, Databricks. We're the only one that wants to work with all of those things and actually sits on top and can really help create a lot of incremental value to those providers. And we're not a competitor. We're not a threat. We're actually are going to really allow organizations to be able to make a decision on which of those platforms they want to use and we'll be able to make sure we enhance those and bring all the capabilities.
So I think, from your perspective, that really de-risks you, number one, and from an organization's perspective, from an enterprise perspective, it de-risks them as well, because then they don't have to get stuck onto one single platform. So I think that's a great proposition, Kris. Now, from a tech perspective, I think we have covered a lot of it when it comes to governance, whether it's data, AI governance, especially AI governance with regulation. So we have just come up with a new solution, and it's called Verify. What that basically does is the framework looks at data right from its origin all the way to its consumption and verifies it on multiple parameters like trustworthiness, bias, and responsibility, and so on throughout its entire journey, right? So and there are measures, there are audit measures, KPIs, and so on. So I think that is something which was our response to the requirements that customers have come up with. In addition to that, we mentioned about we talked about FinOps. So that's another thing that we do very actively with our customers, where we try to identify, first of all, a bucket list of use cases. Then we shortlist, for example, okay, the priority ones and the ones which will give the highest returns. And then we also identify which LLM, or whether an SLM, or a fine-tuned model, or in some cases, by the way, for almost 15 customers, we are developing foundational models. We are actually creating their own LLMs. So the requirement is very different for different use cases. And so these are the different ways we are approaching the problem. I don't think I think we are just starting off on the journey, to be very frank. So I think great talking to you, Kris. Any last word?
I think, as you say, it's the start of the journey, an inflection point for our company. But we're a technology vendor, and actually our success comes with partnering with organisations like yourself, who can actually manage also the change management and all of those complexities and the integration and things like that. So, I really feel that when we come together, that's where the best capability for our customers come from. Is really partnering and going to.
Absolutely. And for us, see, ultimately we are service providers, and in a field that's changing so fast, innovation drives the change at the end of the day, and which is where our partner vendors become so important, because they are the ones driving innovation on the ground, and we have to continuously even upskill ourselves, and our folks need to figure out how to deliver those services and so on and so forth. So very important for us. So great working with Dataiku and partnering with you.
Yeah, and you too.
And thank you so much, Kris.